this week, we're going to dive into Lightroom. We might even dive into Photoshop. Who knows? It's going to be one of those editing kind of good times. We're editing a wildlife photo. You already know that because of the title of this video. And what we both know is it's Tutorial Tuesday. Welcome back to Tutorial Tuesday, where each and every Tuesday we bring you a brand new, fresh photography tutorial. This week, of course, is no different. We're diving into the world of editing once again. We're going to edit a wildlife photo. Now, we're going to approach this in Lightroom initially, but a lot of the kind of techniques carry over to things like Capture One and stuff like that. We might even dive into Photoshop. I'm not sure yet. I'm not sure what we're going to do exactly with this photo. But before we get started, I just want to say, anyone who came to SWPP last week, so the Society of Wedding and Portrait Photographers convention up in London, up in Hammersmith, it was great to see you guys. I was there on a Thursday and I spoke to so many of you, and it was so nice to actually talk to you about your photography and different experiences. And it was really lovely how many of you came up to say hi to me and actually speak to me. It was really, really nice. So if you ever see me at a show or an event at Park Cameras or anything like that, always feel free to come up and say hi. I love talking to you guys about all kinds of stuff. Photography, I guess, mostly. But I love talking to you guys about all your experiences, the kit you're using, all kinds of stuff. So that was really, really lovely. Just wanted to say a big thank you to everyone who came to say hi to me when I was up at the show. Let's dive into Lightroom. Now, I've got this photo here. This was when we were shooting with the Canon 1200mm, so the RF 1200mm lens, which is, a lovely lens. I appreciate, price-wise, it's probably not for everyone. There will be a link in the description if you want to go check that out. But we're going to edit this photo nonetheless. I took a bunch of photos. We're at Richmond Park. So lots of deer and parrots, apparently. Didn't know that was going to be the case, but loads of deer photos for sure. We're going to edit this photo, and essentially with a photo specifically like this one, it's not an action shot, right? It's not something extremely interesting happens. So it's more of a portrait of this deer. So we're going to approach it in a very similar way to the way I would edit a portrait. Now, I like this photo because it's shooting past a tree. So we don't have the bottom part of our deer friend here, but we do have this kind of natural framing of this kind of tree that we're shooting past to get to the deer. So I really like that. We're going to go ahead and begin. This is completely raw. This photo, I think it was taken the R3. Let's just dive in. So the first thing I'm going to do, the first thing I would always do with a photo like this, I'm going to look at this. The lighting was reasonably flat on that day. We did have a bit of sun for about 5 minutes, but otherwise it was pretty much just clouds. So not the worst thing in the world, to be honest, because you get this nice kind of softbox lighting, which is quite nice, but no dramatic lighting. So we're not going to lean into that at all. But what we are going to do is maybe create a little bit of our own. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to up that contrast just a little bit because it's a raw file. Might need a little bit of contrast there. I don't think I'm going to touch the highlights, but I might just bring the shadows down a touch. But I think we're probably going to end up playing around with those a little bit ourselves. Texture, let's up that a little bit. Not too much, 15 is fine. And clarity, let's bring that up a little bit as well. Again, not too much. Let's go something like 10, I think it's fine. We can always come back and change that. Now, vibrance I'm going to bring up, but saturation I'm going to leave as is for now. The primary color across this photo is kind of in the orange area, which I really like. And it might be that we lean into that even more. There's not a lot of, for example, blue. There's a bit of green. We might end up desaturating those greens. Let's just play with that white balance for a second. Let's just make it a little bit warmer. I quite like that, actually. We might come back to it. Let's come down here to the tone curve. I'm just going to pop a point sort of between the sort of shadows and the midtones and just bring that down just a touch. I might then pop a point sort of in the midtones a little bit there, almost towards the highlights, and bring that up. Let's just turn that off, turn that back on. We've added a bit of contrast there, which I quite like. We might come back and actually turn that off in the end, but for now, let's leave it on. And then the hue, saturation, and luminance tab, which I love, obviously. This is where the magic starts to come together in terms of coloring this photo. So let's go ahead and just bring the orange down a touch. Not too much, not too much. We don't want to go too crazy with it. But this is where we can really start to affect the colors. So especially in the hue here, we can actually change these colors to other colors. So orange, we've just brought down to a richer kind of burnt orange. Yellow, I'm going to do a similar sort of thing. I'm going to bring that down. And you can see we're now starting to move everything towards a similar kind of area. Now green, we've got a couple of different options, right? We could bring it towards the green there, doesn't do too much, towards sort of more of a pure green. Could bring it towards yellow. Again, doesn't do too much there. I'm going to probably bring it towards the yellow side of things, but I think we're probably going to end up desaturating the green. Blues, I just like to bring them a little bit towards teal. There's not really a lot of blue here, so I don't think we need to worry. Let's go over to saturation now. I'm going to bring the greens down. I don't think they need to be in there. And the yellows I might bring down a little bit as well. If I bring the yellows all the way down, I actually really quite like that. In fact, do you know what? That means I've changed my mind. I'm going to bring the yellows down further than I was originally going to do it. I think I quite like that. Let's bring blue down as well. Again, if you look, it doesn't really do anything. There's not really blue in here, but let's desaturate the blues. So we're really leaning into that kind of orange feel, the color of both the deer and the foliage around and the trees and all that kind of stuff. I guess a brown orange. The deer is obviously not just a pure orange. Let's go into luminance here as well. And if we were to bring that orange up a little bit, you can see actually more of the foliage around starts to brighten. So let's bring that down. Do you know what? I'm going to leave that exactly as it is. The yellow, I'm just going to bring down a touch. I think that's all good. Now, if I was to add some color in here with the color grading, I think it might end up being a little bit too aggressive with the color. But let's see. Let's add some color to the midtone. So if I add some orange in there, what does that look like? And maybe a little bit of blue to the shadows. Let's go for kind of a blue like that. I don't hate this. We're sort of turning this into a bit of a styled photo here. Some orange into the highlights. I'll lessen that a little bit. We can do that by just dragging these circles into the different colors here around these circles. So we've got midtones, we've got shadows, we've got highlights. And we're actually adding color to those parts of the photo, which is great. It's great, but you know, it can sometimes feel a bit over the top. So if I was to turn that off, for example, I actually really like it. It's adding a bit of depth and a bit of color to that. But if I was to turn the hue, saturation, and luminance off as well, look at the difference there. That's pretty huge. So I'm pretty happy so far. Like I say, it's a bit of a stylized photo. Now, of course, you can always see how far you've gone in Lightroom by just pressing the / key. Let's press that now. And we're going to see what the photo looked like when we first started. Press it again. This is where we are. You can press Y as well to do a side-by-side comparison of where you started and where you are now. So we've definitely got more color in there. It's punchier, and we've really lent into those orange tones, which I really like. So we're going to carry on. Let's come down here. I'm going to leave the detail as is. I always think the detail it's pretty good, right? The sharpening, it looks good. Lightroom kind of sets it already. We don't need to do any noise reduction. It's been I'll be honest, it's been a long time since I've had to do any noise reduction. And I am going to bring in a bit of a vignette, because look at that immediately. If I turn that off and back on, it's really, because our subject is in the middle of the frame, that is really pushing the view into that. So here I'm using -15. You can just drag this down. I mean, the more you drag it down, the more kind of aggressive it becomes. I think I'm going to go -17. I think looks good, but we might end up adding our own kind of feel to this, because we're going to come onto masking in a second, which will be very, very fun. That's where a lot of the shaping of the light comes into it, which is a big fun time. Now let's come down to the calibration tab at the bottom. I'm going to bring the red primary over towards the orange a little bit. See, the more I do that, the more kind of yellow it starts to become. But if you combine that a little bit with the blue primary over towards the teal, we really start to feel that orange coloring. If I turn this calibration off and then back on, you see we're almost adding color here. And ultimately, it's becoming very punchy, very colorful. Let's look at the before and then the after. Look at that. Massive difference. Now, I might end up wanting to bring that saturation down just a touch. You know, I'm going to bring it down to -7. We said we might come back to it, and we have, because I don't want it to get too colorful. That's a mistake that a lot of photographers, including myself, make when we first start with photography. We'll oversaturate things. We'll add too much color, because color is exciting, right? It pops, it's bright, it's very exciting, but you can definitely add too much and the photo starts to look a bit ridiculous. It's certainly an over-processed look. And you know, this is in danger of that for sure. If we look at before and after, this is a really edited photo, but personally, I think the subject suits it. So great. Okay, I'm very happy with this. We've done what you'd call the global edit. So that's where we're editing the actual photo as a whole. Now we're going to dive into a bit of masking. So let's go ahead and click this symbol up here, which opens the masks here. Now, there's a couple of things I could do. I could select the subject itself, so the deer, and actually brighten that. That would be a great way of making it pop in the frame. But instead, that's normally what I do, but instead I'm going to click the radial gradient. Now this is going to allow me to draw out a circle, which I'm going to draw on our dear friend's face here. Just going to make it sort of roughly in line there with his or her. I don't know. I don't know enough about deers to know if this is his or her. If you know, let me know down in the comments. I'd love to know. But I'm going to draw this over our dear friend's face here, and I'm going to just bring the exposure up a touch. Now, you don't go too crazy with this, but essentially everything inside the circle is being affected by all these sliders. Everything outside is not. So we're just brightening the face, which is exactly what I do in a portrait, to try and make that kind of stand out. That's the main part of the image here. Now I'm going to go ahead and click Create New Mask, Radial Gradient. I'm going to draw another circle. I might go a little bit bigger with this one. I'm just rotating it like that. And this time I'm going to come up here to the masks. I'm just going to click these 3 buttons here, and I'm going to click Invert. Now that's going to affect everything outside of the circle. And I'm actually going to bring that exposure down a touch. I want to darken everything around the face. Again, this is a technique I'd use in portraits to really make the subject pop and stand out, be the main part of the image. And I think if you look at that, we've done a pretty good job of it. You know, we can turn off all the masks here. If we go back into the masking panel, we can turn them all off and back on. Now, this is where a lot of subjectivity comes into it. Now, of course, all of photography is subjective, but this is where a lot of subjectivity comes into it, because you might like this as the end point. You might think, this looks great. I love the coloring, done. And you might think this is too much. You might think, no, now we're going too far with it. But I quite like this initially, and we're not done, but we are treating this, like I say, as a portrait now, which I think is fine because it is a portrait. So let's continue. Let's click Create New Mask, Linear Gradient. And I'm going to drag this in from the top left. Now, this is going to be simulating sunlight a little bit. So let's bring the exposure up. Let's bring the dehaze down a touch. And let's just drag that in a little bit more. I might even just warm that a touch. I think that looks quite good. If I turn that off and back on, I think that does look quite good. And what I'm going to do is create a new mask. Let's go brush. This time I'm going to just brush over. So everything in red is covered by the mask, right? I'm going to brush over this kind of branch, this tree that's covering a bit of the image. This is what we shot through. And I'm going to bring that exposure down a little bit. And I might even just do that across this tree behind. Possibly just bring the clarity up, see what that looks like. Yeah, I quite like that. So if I turn that off and then back on, we're starting to really push the view towards the deer. We're really starting to frame that with darkness around it. And then we've got the light coming in from the left, which I really like. Let's turn all of the masks off. And then back on. So you can really, when we do that, you can really see that we've really made the face the focal kind of point, the proper popping portrait style that we've gone for here. Let's turn it off, turn it back on. But I really like it. I think we've done a decent job here. Let's click done to come out of the masking. And I might just bring that clarity up a little bit more again. Now, let's look at the before. This is where we started with this photo. This is where we ended. So it's a very stylistic kind of look to the photo. But I like that. I'm a big fan. I like it a lot. I think that would be how I would edit this photo, because I think since there's not a lot going on in terms of action, I would probably lean towards a more styled portrait, which is what we've ended up with here. Now, if you'd like to see an edit of an action photo, of a more action-packed wildlife photo, let me know down in the comments. If there's something else you'd like to see in particular, let me know down in the comments as well. I know there's some that we still haven't got to, even from around Christmas, but don't you worry. They're all on the list. I'm just waiting for the perfect moment. Don't you worry, it's coming. It's definitely coming. But let me know anything else you'd like to see down in the comments as well. Now, of course, there's a link in the description so you can go and check out all of the kit used for both this photo, but also the camera and lens used for filming this and the microphone and all that kind of stuff down in the description. Don't forget to like and subscribe as well if you enjoyed the video, because there's new stuff all the time, every week. Woohoo! I will, of course, see you in the next video. But until then, as always, thanks for watching.